Joanna, known as Joanna the Mad, was Queen of Castile from 1504 and of Aragon from 1516. From the union of these two crowns modern Spain evolved. Joanna married Philip the Handsome, who was crowned King of Castile in 1506, initiating the rule of the Habsburgs in Spain. After Philip's death that same year, Joanna was deemed mentally ill and was confined to a nunnery for the rest of her life. Though she remained the legal Queen of Castile throughout this time, her father, Ferdinand II of Aragon, was regent until his death, when she inherited his kingdom as well. From 1517, her son, Charles, ruled as king, while she nominally remained co-monarch. Life before accession, early life. Joanna was born in the city of Toledo, the capital of the Kingdom of Castile. She was the third child and second daughter of Isabella I of Castile and Ferdinand II of Aragon of the royal house of Trastamara. Joanna had been a clever and diligent child and an excellent student. Queen Isabella came to ensure that Joanna along with her three sisters Isabella, Maria, and Catherine received a fine education. Her academic education consisted of canon and civil law, genealogy and heraldry, grammar, history, languages, mathematics, philosophy, reading, spelling, and writing. She did read an impressive list of authors of classical literature that included the Christian poets Juvencus and Prudentius, Church Fathers St. Ambrose, St. Augustine, St. Gregory, and St. Jerome, and the Roman statesman Seneca. In the Castilian court her main tutors were the Dominican priest Andrea Copyright Esther Miranda, the respected educator Beatriz Galindo who was a member of the Queen's court, and her mother the Queen. Joanna developed feminine accomplishments in court etiquette, dancing, drawing, equestrian skills, good manners, music, and the needle arts of embroidery, needlepoint, and sewing. She excelled in all of the Iberian Romance languages, Castilian, Leonese, Galician Portuguese, and Catalan and had been fluent in French and Latin. Joanna had been given instruction in religious studies and she had learned outdoor pursuits such as hawking and hunting. Praise was given to her for being a skilled dancer and a talented musician in playing the clavichord, the guitar, and the monochord. She was educated and formally trained for a significant marriage that, as a royal family alliance, would extend the kingdom's power and security as well as its influence and peaceful relations with other ruling powers. As an infanta she was not expected to be heiress to the throne of either Castile or Aragon, although through deaths she later inherited both. She had a fair complexion, blue eyes and her hair color was between strawberry blonde and auburn, like her mother and sister Catherine. Already in 1495 Joanna showed signs of religious skepticism and little devotion to worship and Christian rites. This alarmed her mother, who ordered it to be kept secret. English ambassadors at Valencia on June 23, 1505 attempted to give a detailed description of her appearance according to 15 criteria, though her clothing hampered their estimation. Marriage. In 1496, Joanna, at the age of 16, was betrothed to Philip the Handsome, Duke of Burgundy, in the region of Flanders in the Low Countries. Philip's parents were Maximilian I, Holy Roman Emperor and his first wife, Duchess Mary of Burgundy. The marriage was one of a set of family alliances between the Habsburgs and the Trastamaras designed to strengthen both against growing French power. Joanna entered a proxy marriage at the Palacio de los Vivero in the city of Valladolid, Castile. In August 1496 Joanna left from the port of Laredo in northern Spain on the Atlantic's Bay of Biscay. She would not see her siblings again except for her younger sister Catherine of Aragon in 1506, who was then the Princess Dowager of Wales. Joanna began her journey to Flanders in the Low Countries, which consisted of parts of the present-day Netherlands, Belgium, Luxembourg, France, and Germany, on August 22, 1496. The formal marriage took place on October 20, 1496 in Lier, north of present-day Brussels. Between 1498 and 1507, she gave birth to 6 children, 2 emperors and 4 queens. Joanna's life with Philip was rendered extremely unhappy due to his infidelity and her political insecurity. He consistently attempted to usurp her legal birthrights to power. This led in no small part to rumors of her insanity, stoked by reports of her depressive or neurotic acts while she was imprisoned or manipulated by her husband. Princess of Asturias, the death of Joanna's brother John, the stillbirth of John's daughter and the deaths of Joanna's older sister Isabella and Isabella's son Miguel made Joanna heiress to the Spanish kingdoms. Her remaining siblings were Maria and Catherine, younger than Joanna by 3 and 6 years, respectively. In 1502, the Castilian Cortes of Toro recognized Joanna as heiress to the Castilian throne and Philip as her consort. She was named Princess of Asturias, the title traditionally given to the heir of Castile. Also in 1502, the Aragonese Cortes gathered in Zaragoza to swear an oath to Joanna as heiress. However, the Archbishop of Saragossa expressed firmly that this oath could only establish jurisprudence by way of a formal agreement on the succession between the Cortes and the king. In 1502, Philip, Joanna and a large part of the Burgundian court travelled to Spain for Joanna to receive fealty from the Cortes of Castile as Princess of Asturias, heiress to the Castilian throne, a journey chronicled in great detail by Antoine van Lalijn. Philip and the majority of the court returned to the Low Countries in the following year, leaving a pregnant Joanna in Madrid where she gave birth to her and Philip's fourth child, Ferdinand, later a Central European monarch and Holy Roman Emperor as Ferdinand I reign. Queen of Castile, succession. Upon the death of her mother in November 1504, Joanna became Queen Regnant of Castile and her husband Juriaxoris its king. Joanna's father, Ferdinand II, lost his monarchical status in Castile although his wife's will permitted him to govern in Joanna's absence or, if Joanna was unwilling to rule herself, until Joanna's heir reached the age of 20. Ferdinand refused to accept this. He minted Castilian coins in the name of Ferdinand and Joanna, King and Queen of Castile Louisiana copyright on and Aragon, and, in early 1505, persuaded the Cortes that Joanna's illness is such that the said Queen do plus or minus a Joanna our Lady cannot govern. The Cortes then appointed Ferdinand as Joanna's guardian and the kingdom's administrator and governor. However, her husband Philip the Handsome was unwilling to accept any threat to his chances of ruling Castile and also minted coins in the name of Philip and Joanna, King and Queen of Castile Louisiana copyright on and Archdukes of Austria, etc. In response, Ferdinand embarked upon a pro-French policy, marrying Germaine de Foix, niece of Louis XII of France, in the hope that she would produce a son to inherit Aragon and perhaps Castile. Ferdinand's remarriage merely strengthened support for Philip and Joanna in Castile, and in late 1505, the pair decided to travel to Castile. Leaving Flanders on January 10, 1506, their ships were wrecked on the English coast and the couple were guests of Henry, Prince of Wales, later Henry VIII and Joanna's sister Catherine of Aragon at Windsor Castle. They weren't able to leave until April 21, by which time civil war was looming in Castile. Philip apparently considered landing in Andalusia and summoning the nobles to take up arms against Ferdinand in Aragon. Instead, he and Joanna landed at Acorra plus or minus on April 26, whereupon the Castilian nobility abandoned Ferdinand en masse. Ferdinand met Philip at Villaferfila on June 20, 1506 and handed over the government of Castile to his most beloved children, promising to retire to Aragon. Philip and Ferdinand then signed a second treaty, agreeing that Joanna's mental instability made her incapable of ruling and promising to exclude her from government. Ferdinand then proceeded to repudiate the agreement the same afternoon, declaring that Joanna should never be deprived of her rights as Queen Proprietress of Castile. A fortnight later, having come to no fresh agreement with Philip and thus effectively retaining his right to interfere if he considered his daughter's rights to have been infringed upon, he abandoned Castile for Aragon, leaving Philip to govern in Joanna's stead. Philip's death, by virtue of the agreement of Villaferfila, the procurators of the Cortes met in Valladolid, Castile on July 9, 1506. On July 12, they swore allegiance to Philip I and Joanna together as King and Queen of Castile and Liquidén and to their son Charles, later Charles I of Castile, Leon and Aragon and Charles V, Holy Roman Emperor, as their heir apparent. This arrangement only lasted for a few months. On September 25, 1506, Philip died suddenly of typhoid fever in the city of Burgos in Castile. Some suspected that he had been poisoned by his father-in-law Ferdinand II, who had always disliked his foreign Habsburg origins and with whom he never wanted to share power. Joanna was pregnant with their sixth child, a daughter named Catherine, who later became Queen of Portugal. By December 20, 1506, Joanna was in the village of Torquemada in Castile, attempting to exercise her rights to rule alone in her own name as Queen of Castile. The country fell into disorder. Her son and heir apparent, Charles, later Charles I, was a 6-year-old child being raised in his aunt's care in northern European Flanders. Her father, Ferdinand II, remained in Aragon, allowing the crisis to grow. A regency council under Archbishop Cisneros was set up against the Queen's orders, but it was unable to manage the growing public disorder. Plague and famine devastated the kingdom, with supposedly half the population perishing of one or the other. The Queen was unable to secure the funds required to assist her to protect her power. In the face of this, Ferdinand II returned to Castile in July 1507. His arrival coincided with a remission of the plague and famine, a development which quieted the instability and left an impression that his return had restored the health of the kingdom. Father's regency. Ferdinand II and Joanna met at Hornillos, Castile on July 30, 1507. Ferdinand then constrained her to yield up her power over the Kingdom of Castile and Lequeuden to himself. On August 17, 1507, she summoned 3 members of the Royal Council and ordered them to inform the grandees, in her name, of her father Ferdinand II's return to power, that they should go to receive His Highness and serve him as they would her person and more. She refused to sign the instructions a last gesture of defiance and issued a statement that she did not, as Queen Regnant, endorse the surrender of her own royal power. Nonetheless, she was thereafter Queen in name only, and all documents, though issued in her name, were signed with Ferdinand's signature, I the King. He was named administrator of the kingdom by the Cortes of Castile in 1510, and entrusted the government mainly to Archbishop Cisneros. He had Joanna confined in the Santa Clara convent in Tordesillas, near Valladolid in Castile, in February 1509, after having dismissed all of her faithful servants and having appointed a small retinue accountable to him alone. At this time, some accounts claim that she was insane or mad, and that she took her husband's corpse with her to Tordesillas to keep it close to her. First Queen of Spain, succession as Queen of Aragon, Ferdinand II ended his days embittered. His second marriage had failed to produce a surviving male heir, leaving his daughter Joanna as his heiress presumptive. Ferdinand resented that, upon his death, Castile and Aragon would effectively pass to his foreign-born and raised grandson Charles I, to whom he had transferred his hatred of Philip I. He had hoped that his younger grandson and namesake, Ferdinand I, who was Charles I's brother and had been born and raised in Castile, would succeed him. Ferdinand II had named Ferdinand as his heir in his will before being persuaded to revoke this bequest and rename Joanna and Charles I as his heirs presumptive instead. When Ferdinand II died in 1516, the kingdoms of Castile and Lequeuden, and Aragon and their associated crowns and territories colonies would pass to Joanna I and Charles I. With Charles I still in Flanders, Aragon was being governed after Ferdinand II's death by his bastard son, Alonso de Aragon. Meanwhile, Castile and Lequeuden, already subjects of Joanna, were governed by Archbishop Cisneros as regent. A group of nobles, led by the Duke of Infantado, attempted to proclaim the Infante Ferdinand as King of Castile, but the attempt failed. Son as co-monarch, in October 1517, 17-year-old Charles I arrived in Asturias at the Bay of Biscay. On November 4, he and his sister Eleanor met their mother Joanna at Tordesillas. There they secured from her the necessary authorization to allow Charles to rule as her co-king of Castile and Lequeuden and of Aragon. Despite her acquiescence to his wishes, her confinement would continue. The Castilian Cortes, meeting in Valladolid, spited Charles by addressing him only as Su Alteza and reserving Maestad for Joanna. However, no one seriously considered rule by Joanna a realistic proposition. In 1519 Charles I now ruled the Kingdom of Aragon and its territories and the Kingdom of Castile and Lequeuden and its territories, in personal union. In addition, that same year Charles was elected Holy Roman Emperor. The kingdoms of Castile and Aragon remained in personal union until their jurisdictional unification in the early 18th century by the Bourbons, while Charles abdicated as Emperor of the Holy Roman Empire in favor of his brother Ferdinand, and the personal union with the Spanish kingdoms was dissolved. Revolt of the Comuneros. In 1520, the Revolt of the Comuneros broke out in response to the perceived foreign Habsburg influence over Castile through Charles V. The rebel leaders demanded that Castile be governed in accordance with the supposed practices of the Catholic monarchs. In an attempt to legitimize their rebellion, the Comuneros turned to Joanna. As the on-record sovereign monarch, had she given written approval to the rebellion, it would have been legalized and would have triumphed. In an attempt to prevent this, Don Antonio de Rojas, Bishop of Mallorca, led a delegation of royal councillors to Tordesillas, asking Joanna to sign a document denouncing the Comuneros. She demurred, requesting that he present her specific provisions. Before this could be done, the Comuneros in turn stormed the virtually undefended city and requested her support. The request prompted Adrian of Utrecht, the regent appointed by Charles V., to declare that Charles would lose Castile if she granted her support. Although she was sympathetic to the Comuneros, she was persuaded by Ecoa de Landa and her confessor Fray John of Avila that supporting the revolt would irreparably damage the country and her son's kingship, and she therefore refused to sign a document granting her support. The Battle of Valhalla confirmed that Charles would prevail over the revolt. Forced confinement. Charles ensured his domination and throne by having his mother confined for the rest of her life in the rooms of the convent of Santa Clara in Tordesillas, Castile. Joanna's condition degenerated further. She apparently became convinced that some of the nuns of the convent wanted to kill her, a fear which was never proved. Reportedly it was difficult for her to eat, sleep, bathe, or change her clothes. Charles wrote to the convent of Santa Clara caretakers, "It seems to me that the best and most suitable thing for you to do is to make sure that no person speaks with Her Majesty, for no good could come from it." Joanna had her youngest daughter, Catherine of Austria, with her during Ferdinand II's time as regent, 1507–1516. Her older daughter, Eleanor of Austria, had created a semblance of a household within the convent rooms. In her final years, Joanna's physical state began to rapidly decline, with mobility ever more difficult. Joanna died on Good Friday 12 April 1555 at the age of 75 in the convent of Santa Clara at Tordesillas. She is entombed in the Royal Chapel of Granada in Spain alongside her parents Isabella I and Ferdinand II, her husband Philip I and her nephew Miguel da Paz, Prince of Asturias. A statue of her stands in Tordesillas, and the convent in which she was confined for 50 years can be visited. Mental health. As a young woman, she was known to be highly intelligent. It was only after her marriage that the first accusations of mental illness arose. One reason for this may be due to the sympathy she showed for Martin Luther's ideas. A. Some historians comment that she may have suffered from melancholia, a depressive disorder, a psychosis, or a case of inherited schizophrenia. There is debate about the diagnosis that she was mentally ill. Joanna's symptoms were perhaps aggravated by her non-consensual confinement and control by others who had assumed her royal powers to legitimize the claims of her husband, father, and son to the throne. Joanna was nominalized as Queen Regent of Castile, Lequeuden, and Aragon until her death. It is possible that she inherited mental illness from her mother's family. Her maternal grandmother Isabella of Portugal, Queen of Castile, suffered from this condition in widowhood after her stepson exiled her to the castle of Ara. Copyright Valo in Avila, Castile. Legacy in arts and letters. The story of Queen Joanna attracted authors, composers and artists of the 19th century Romanticist movement, with her qualities of unrequited love and moral fidelity. Later authors often focus on the grief-stricken woman and her mental illness. An incomplete list of these works follows: Felipe el Hermoso, a Eusebio Ascarino and Gregorio Romero. A play in 4 acts. La Loca de Amor Euro Manuel Tomeo y Baus. Play, do plus or minus a Joanna la Loca Euro Emilio Serrano. Opera. Joanna la Loca Euro Francisco Pradilla. Painting. Currently in the Prado Museum of Madrid, Spain. Loca de Amor Euro Juan Diego plus or minus a. Film. The Prisoner of Tordesillas Euro Lawrence Schoonover. Novel. Terra Nostra Euro Carlos Fuentes. Novel. La Loca Euro Giancarlo Menotti. Opera. Mariner by the playwright Don Nigro. Play. Un amour fou Euro Catherine Hermery Vial. Novel. Las Ruinas del Carrizo den Euro Eric Gamalinda. Poem. Joanna la Loca Euro directed by Vicente Aranda and starring Pilar Pez de Ayala as Joanna, was nominated for 12 Goya Awards, and was released in the U.S. as Mad Love. Based on La Loca de Amor by Manuel Tomeo y Baus. El Pergamino de la Seduccia den Euro Gioconda Belli. Novel in Spanish. The Last Queen Euro C.W. Gortner. Novel in English and Spanish, Arms. Children. All Joanna's children except Mary had children. However, only Charles, Isabella and Ferdinand have descendants today. Ancestry, references. Bibliography, biographies, W. H. Prescott, Hist. Of Ferdinand and Isabella, Rosia, Johanna di Warnsinage, 1890, H. Tighe, A Queen of Unrest, Avila, La Reina do plus or minus a Joanna la Loca, Bethany Aram, Joanna the Mad, Sovereignty and Dynasty in Renaissance Europe, Adriano Orsini, La Rose di Cordova, Scrittura and Scritture, Napoli 2007, works cited, Militi. The Castles and the Crown. Coward McCann, New York, 1963, Aram, Bethany, Joanna the Mad's Signature, The Problem of Invoking Royal Authority, 1505-1507, 16th Century Journal, Eliot, J.H., Imperial Spain, 1469 Euro 1716, de Francisco Olmos, Jose Copyright Mara A. Estudio Documental de la Moneda Castellana de Joanna la Loca fabricada en los Porces Bajos, Revista General de Información den y Documentación den 2002, Vol 12, now M2, de Francisco Olmos, Jose Copyright Mara A. Estudio Documental de la Moneda Castellana de Carlos I fabricada en los Porces Bajos. Revista General de Información den y Documentación den 2003, Vol 13, now M2. Juan Navarro, Santiago, Maria Gomez, and Phyllis Otlin. Joanna of Castile, History and Myth of the Mad Queen. Newark and London, Bucknell University Press, 2008. External links, Biography of Joanna the Mad of Castile, Joanna of Castile at Find a Grave.